Today we're going to be making this cool little guy in a hat. This is Tobias the Toad, so stick around if you want to find out how to put him together. Welcome back to a kooky corner of YouTube. It's a spooky kooky corner still because it's still that time of the year. And so, if you remember a while back when we did our superb owl, we did Merlin. Well, now he has got a cousin. I don't know if owls and frogs could be related, but we'll go with it. So yes, Tobias Toad, in a similar vein to the way we made Merlin, but I'm going to go through them again anyway, just in case anybody didn't catch this one. It was on the Superb Owl video, so you might not have seen it, but if you haven't, just go and pop back and have a look at that one, and you'll be able to make a pair if you want to, or maybe even add in a different one as well, who knows. Anyway, let's have a little look at what we're going to need. So you're going to need a piece of fabric to go in your hoop to embroider on. I tend to use this calico because it's a nice weight. And because I am using some Inktense pencils in order to colour my piece, then this works really well with those. So that's why I'm using those. I'm going to need some scissors. Obviously, I've got some fabric scissors and I've got my little embroidery scissors as well. You're going to need some embroidery threads. What else are you going to need? You're going to need a needle, that's for sure. And possibly, if you want to back your piece afterwards, as I have backed this guy, you're going to need some stiffish felt to go on the back. And then obviously, you're going to need the Inktense pencils. So let me grab out the pencils that I've used for this and tell you which ones I got. I tried to keep with the similar ones that we had to make the other embroideries that we've done, so that you're not buying loads of pencils and such. But you might want to grab a couple more of the greens. So I think Golden Sun was definitely one we had last time. I know gold is definitely in there as well. We had the Wild Flame. We also had this mango colour, which is an orangey colour. And we definitely had the charcoal grey. I use the charcoal grey instead of black just because I kind of like the lightness that it gives. It's not as heavy as a black. So, but you can double up with this. I'll explain more later. And then in the greens, we've got a light olive, a beach green, and a spring green. So there's a couple of new greens in there, just specifically because it is a toad. So it's a little toady guy, and he needs a few different greens in order to get all those different angles and colours and what have you. So let's have a little look at him. Here he is. You can probably see some of the little greens in there. I kind of mingle them all together just to give him the overall appearance. And outline is in a dark green for my toad, and then the hat was in more of a black colour. And then I've used some yellow thread for his little warty spots. The brown on there is just for these little ad hoc leaves that you can add on or leave off. It's totally up to you. I don't think the pattern has them on, but they're really simple to do. And yeah, so let's get into it. First thing we need to do is to hoop up. So I undo my hoopy boy here. Now I'm going to give you a little tip with when you copy your piece onto your fabric. So decide which way is going to be the right side. Probably that way, yeah. No, I'm doing it the wrong way again. I was doing something weird. That's it. So that the right side is on the inside, if you get my meaning, because we're going to do something with this that makes life a little bit easier. So here's my pattern. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to lay that down. You could do this on a light box or a window if you want to. I'm just going to do it at my desk because I can actually see through the fabric enough. Can you see that? You probably won't be able to, but I can. Can you see that? I can actually see that really well through the fabric on my desk here. If I couldn't, I would use a light box. I'm just going to position that in a correct place-ish. Making sure I've got my hoop over the top. And what I use to transfer is a friction pen. This is a friction pen in a light blue. I know a lot of people are not keen on friction pens. I don't mind them. I'm quite happy to use them because I do realise that the colour can come back in extreme cold. It can easily be got rid of again with a hairdryer. So I am not at all worried. Most of my stitches, in fact, 98% of them are going to be covered up with a thread anyway, so don't worry too much. So having your fabric flat against your piece is the perfect way to get this down, because then you can actually see through it and transfer it over. So I am just going to continue and transfer my toad pattern onto my fabric. If you've got other ways that you prefer to do this, you do those. I am not trying to teach anybody to do something that they're not comfortable with. So if you don't like using friction pens, you transfer however you feel happy. Some people can use like a carbon transfer. You could use some stick and stitch if you wanted to do that, like the sulky stuff that you stick on and then wash off afterwards. I'm going to go with my friction pen. So you choose your method of transferring, and then we'll get on to the putting on some magical colour. So my pattern is all transferred on. I am now going to get in with colouring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find another sheet of paper to put underneath, and then that will act as like a barrier between the desk and the Inktense. So I'll do that now and we'll get set up. So I've gone in a little closer so that you can see what I'm up to. I've got my Inktense pencils here on one side. First thing I'm going to colour in is the stars, because why not? I'm using gold, or you could use the golden sun. Either of those two will work well. I'm going to go in with this. Now these I like to colour in because what I do is I put some Stickles glue over the top of them to give them that shine. So let me just grab that back out again. So if you can see mine like that, they're outlined and then they've got some shiny glitter in there. You know I do like that. Well, if you don't, you can just use the Inktense and just make it a little more vibrant, really. And if you find that it's not as intense as you wanted it to be once you painted it, let it dry and add some more. This is a really good thing. Less is more to start off with until you're happy with the colour. I know that I want quite a vibrant look with mine, so I'm just going in quite heavily with my colouring, just because I like these to be nice and shiny and bright. Also, I'm going to do the buckle on his hat. This is in the Golden Sun. Again, I'm going to stitch over this, but I find that if you put down the Inktense backing, if some of your stitches don't cover all of the background, then this is a really good fail-safe for that as well. You can decide to put as much or as little stitching into your piece as you want to. So going back to mine, I've outlined everything. So it's like an outline stitch around all of the Inktense, but I've gone in and added stitching in the eyes, and I've used stitching satin stitch for the little the little warts on his back, and in a couple of cases I've used a French knot instead because there was only a small space. In his eyes I've used like a little bit of chain stitching there and satin stitch for the eyes again. So you could go to town, you could add all kinds of different stitches into this. It is absolutely up to you, but this is for the kind of get the colour down, and then you can make choices afterwards about stitching. Okay, so what else did I have in there? I had this bit here, which is in the yellow. Yeah, the outside of his eyes there is yellow. And I also did his spots. I think I'm going to go back to this gold colour for those. These are stitched over, as you could see from the last one, but to be honest, it's a good option just to get all the colour down, and it's a good guide for what colours you need to add in afterwards as well. On the leafy bits at the side, if you care to add them, that is completely up to you. I've got this beach green, and I'm just going to go with a nice darky green on these. This is very relaxing, this part, actually. I'm going to change over to a different green for this one. This one is light olive. And what I will do on these stitches is like the lazy daisy stitch. But again, you can use whichever stitches you like. Okay, so the hat is fairly simple. I am going to go with, this flame red for the band around it. Sure, that's a wild flame, not flame red. Wild flame. And I'm also going to remember to colour inside the buckle here. And an extra bit of band there. And now I'm going in with the hat colour, which is a charcoal. As I say, you can vary the amount of charcoal on here. I am just having a look at the stitches. There's some marks on here that I forgot to put in. So like where the bends in the hat go, I'll probably put a couple of stitches in just because, and why not? And also on the hat there. It just kind of adds a bit of character to the hat, and I will put those in stitches, but I just realised as I was colouring it in then, I hadn't added them. So you can be really light with this, or you can go in quite heavily. You can also use Inktense blocks for this as well. I like the pencils because of the accuracy I can get, and you can colour in with the Inktense blocks as well. Also, you could just wet the block and just make it more of a watercolour, but I prefer this way for myself only because I quite like the control element that I get from it. It's really easy to add more if I need to. And I'll probably sometimes go over it a couple of times anyway to get the intensity that I want, or to add variation in shading. So I'll paint it out and then see if it needs more. And if it needs more, I'll let it dry and then add more in and paint that out as well. Okay, so I'm going to leave the froggy as it is. All I did with him was, I've got those mixture of greens there, and I just kind of shaded him in different areas. So if it was a darker area, I'd find my darkest green. So maybe the underneath part of his tummy, like so. I would shade in green. And then you can add in other colours as well and blend them together. It's a really good way. That's why I also like the pencils, because you can blend them on the spot. And you can see where the colours are going. and I like that about it. Anyway, I'm just going to stop there for the time being. If you want to see a full like Inktense paint through, there is one on the one where I made Merlin the Owl. So if you want to go back and have a look, but I just want to get into the brush I use. I use this Derwent water brush. It is not essential. I like this one because it lets out the right amount of water. You do not want a sopping wet brush when you activate your Inktense. You want it to be fairly controlled, and I find these water brushes just add the right amount of control. There are many other kinds of water brushes you can try. I really like this one, and I also like, if I can ever find it, here it is. I like the Caran d'Ache one as well, because that's quite a controllable one. And you want something with a smallish brush on the end. So I put a bit on my hand to activate it and then wipe it around a bit to make sure there's not too much. And I'm going to start with the hat just because. And you can just activate the colour. And because I have gone quite heavily with this, it's coming out a nice dark grey colour, which is just what I wanted. Now, if you find on your fabric you're having a problem with bleeding, that means you've either got too much water on your brush, or it could be that it's just a fabric that bleeds. But try to keep the water level to an absolute minimum. And that's why I use these brushes, because they just let just the right amount of water out for me to be happy with the control of it. It's not bleeding, there's tiny little bits on the edge, not too much. So if you're worried about that, don't go right up to the edge, perhaps, of your piece. Just leave it and see what it does. For me, I'm quite happy. I've let quite a bit of water out there, but I let it out in the middle of the piece. I accidentally squeezed on it. But it's gone in the middle of that piece of the hat that I wanted to paint, so that's good luck. We like happy accidents like that. I'm going to paint around there. When you're painting your pieces, I would suggest you stagger painting where you've got changes in colour. So I'm not going to go in and do the hat band yet, because the black is still wet, and that might mean that the black would leak into the orange, which I don't really want it to do. So I'll give it a little bit of time to kind of dry off. And if you want to hurry the process up a little bit, you can always use a heat gun. So the only problem with that is because if you use a heat gun, you're going to remove all those lines. So you have to be really careful that you've got all the lines where you want them to be before you use that. Anyway, making sure I've cleared off all the black. I'm using back of my hand, but that works just as well. It also allows me to know how much water I've got on my brush, so I can feel the amount of water that's going through. Another thing you could do with these is you could use the Caran d'Ache board. I don't know if I've got mine available. Let's have a little look and I'll show you what I mean. Yeah. This is an aquarelle palette, which means that if you've got Caran d'Ache pencils or any other like dry material, you can scrub onto this because it's got quite a rough surface. So you could rub your pencil onto that and then just wet it with that and then just go in. It's probably easier if I show you, isn't it? So I will show you on a little part of this. So for example, I want his little feeties to be a bit yellow. So I'm going in with this gold colour, and what I do is I scrub it onto the palette like that. You can do this with, you don't have to go and buy a Caran d'Ache palette, you can do this with chopping boards if they've got some kind of a textured surface on. And then I just go in with my yellow, like so. So that's another way you can add colour in. To go back in, get some of the water onto there, and then go in on your little froggy, toady feet. Keep calling him a frog. He's a toad. He's definitely a toad. Now, say I want to blend that with the lightest green, so I go and get some of there on my board as well. Scrub it on. Activate it with some water. And then I don't mind if this green bleeds into the yellow, because that's kind of what I want. I want it to blend together. Like so. So that's blending that yellow into that red. I need some more yellow for his foot at the back. Like so. Get some on there. Like that. Also, I can activate this eye part here. It's not touching anything else, so that can be activated now. And then get some of my greens to go there. So I've got this lightish green colour here. And add that in to the legs. Just be aware of the amount of water, again, because sometimes it's easy to add quite a bit of water in and you don't realise that can just spread a little bit on your piece. So just be wary of that. And now just going in with a water brush on here and filling in the rest of my toad. And again, with these greens, I don't mind if they blend in together. I quite want that. Okay, so you play around with your pieces. If you want to test out your colours, you could do that on a piece of paper beforehand, just to make sure you're enjoying what you're using. I'm going to add a bit of yellow into the top of his arm there as well, just because. Now, if you want it to be really intense, you can go in with a pen. Can you see how intense that gets there? Because it's touching the wet. And then you can blend that out if you want to. So you can get more of a defined line with your Inktense that way. If you don't have Inktense but you have Neocolor 2s, also a good option for colouring your piece in. If you have neither of those, then watercolour pencils will work. They won't be as permanent as this. This is permanent when it's dried and heated. But watercolour pencils will work. Actual watercolours will work, but again, be wary of the amount of water that you're putting on your piece. So I'm going to continue playing around with this until he's all painted up. I'll be back with you when I've finished and we'll have a look at the next bit. Okay, so he's all painted up now. I'm going to leave him to dry. I'm just going to wipe off my brush by squeezing an amount of water through it just to clean off the brush, because there's nothing worse than going in with a different colour and then realising you've left some colour on from last time and it just muddies things up. But that's all done now, and I just need to wait for that to dry a little bit before we continue. So I'm just going to leave that on its piece of paper, and if you look underneath, there's very little transference that's gone underneath, so that's all good. That means I didn't use too much water. So that's going to dry up really quickly, and then we can get on to the stitching part of our embroidery, which is going to be fun. So pick out colours that match of what you want. Obviously, you don't have to do a green toad. You could go completely crazy and do a purple toad or a bright orange toad if you wanted to. Use your imagination, tailor it to what you want it to look like. So maybe you don't want these little bits of herbaceous going on around the side. You can leave those out completely. The pattern for this is going to be in the Facebook group. So it's a Cool Kooky Creatures Facebook group. It's not my page, which is just my artist page. It's the group specifically you're looking for. And the pattern, as I just showed you, this one here, will be in the files section for you to download and use as you will. So I'm going to leave this to dry. Be back in a minute. Okay, so I've put a little bit of light on the matter because it's gone quite dark outside. So I've put my overhead light on. So hopefully, I know there's a few shadows, but it won't be too bad. Anyway, this guy can now be rehooped. The reason I do that is because I don't want to stitch into it because these bits get in the way. So now we've finished with the transferring and the painting, what we can do is to unhoop it and then rehoop it. And I'll see how that goes. It needs to go up a little further. There we are. So I want to get him in the centre of my hoop and positioned correctly. About there, just slightly off. There. That's better. So I'm putting my connector bit at the top. It doesn't really matter as long as you can actually get to everything for embroidery purposes, because you can take it out and reposition it and whatnot. Some extra bits on here that I don't need. That's fine. That's all in the fabric. Okay, so tightening up my hoop. I want it to be drum tight. Put it back on the wrong way. Let's try that again. I'll put it that way, that's better. Now I can tighten it up. There we go. Tightening up so you've got a nice drum tightness to your embroidery, and you can keep retightening it just by gently pulling on the edges. If it starts to get a bit wrinkled in the middle, just gently pull on the edges and you can realign it. I'm not too worried about this being completely lined up because what I'm going to do is to paint my frame when I've finished. So it's all going to come back out again anyway. Yeah, so we're all ready to go. Now, threads. I have got some embroidery threads, embroidery floss. I would use 2 strands of that specifically for like back stitching. I have got some of this beautiful cotton pearl to outline my stars because I quite like them to stand out. So that's kind of a thicker thread. It's just slightly thicker than the two strands together. So that's the 2 strands together, and that's the pearl. It just adds a different texture, I think. So all of this in the main is backstitch. So like a split back stitch. So I'm going into the stitch with my needle, and I'll show you what I mean in a minute. Deviations to that are, I've got a little bit of chain stitch around his eye. You don't need to do that if you don't want to. You could simply do that with a satin stitch. Satin stitch on the band on his hat. The leaves on this piece of herb here are like a lazy daisy, an elongated lazy daisy stitch. And that's it really. Everything else is back stitch. So it's really quite a simple one to pull together. If you're not sure of how to do back stitch, there are plenty of like YouTube videos showing you how to do it. And the one I use specifically, the split back stitch, just gives it a more of an even outline. And I'll show you how I do that now by trying to decide which bit to do. I think we'll do the hat. So we'll do the hat for this one. I'll thread up and I'll be back in a second. Okay, back with my needle. So if you want to use whatever stitches you like best with this, I'm actually going to do the outside of his band in black as well. I think I did that on the other one. I did. So with my split back stitch, I will go forward. That makes my first stitch. And then I will go along a little, come out on top. And instead of going down the same hole there, what I will do is go further along into the stitch. So I go into the stitch and then pull it to, and it leaves more of a definite outline than a back stitch, because back stitch is good. And if you like back stitch and you're happy with back stitch, do back stitch. But I quite like this split stitch because it leaves me a more solid outline. You could also do stem stitch if you wanted to, but I think that looks good on plants and things and not so much on solid outlines like I'm doing here. So coming out there, going back into the stitch there, like so. And I'm going to do that all the way around his hat. I'm not going to do the band part. I'm going to do that in gold. So I've got some gold, but you could equally use like an orange or a yellow if you wanted to. And the same for the buckle. So use the stitches that you enjoy using. If you want to try out new ones, go ahead, have fun with it, play with it, try something different. Maybe you want to fill in more parts on your toad than I have on mine. But yeah, just have a play around with it. Do all these stitches and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to finish off your piece. So now Mr. Toad, Mr. Tobias Toad, is ready to be trimmed and finished. He's in his hoop, so I've got this hoop. I think I've mentioned before that I paint my wooden hoops, and I generally use either this Americana or folk art craft paint to paint them with. It dries really quickly, even in winter, which is wonderful. And it just, you can kind of match up your piece to wherever it's going to be situated. So in my case, I painted it with this, what colour is this? French grey blue. That will fit perfectly in one of my bedrooms, which is where this one's going to hang. So I've shown you before how I finish these off, but I will go through it again. I'm literally going to trim it. I need a bit of an edge on left on it, around it, at least a couple of centimetres, or however much you've got. A couple of centimetres is fine. Just so that we can finish up our hoop in a neat and tidy fashion. Trim to there. And I'll just take a bit of that corner. It's a bit longer than anticipated. Okay, get rid of all the bits. Turn him over, and I've got a knot in my thread. I'm going to start just doing a run-in stitch around this fabric here. This is kind of one of the best ways I found of finishing up these pieces. You could, there's another way where you could hot glue and just stick the fabric round it. I just like this one because I know then that the glue's not going to interfere with my embroidery piece. I don't know if it would or not over time, not sure. So in order to take out that anxiety out of the equation, then stitching is my go-to. And you don't have to be neat with this at all. This is just a means of being able to pull this in so that we can finish it off. How do you finish off your hoops? If you've got a specific way, I would be very interested, and I'm sure other people would be very interested to know what you do. to finish off your hoops. But this is the way I've kind of found and developed over the way. You look at how other people do things, you adapt it to your own processes, and that's what I always suggest with everything is you don't have to blindly follow. You do what suits you best. So if you find hot glue, you just did it around the edges there, that would, you know, probably be absolutely fine. But yeah, you do what suits you. So if you've got a different way of doing this, please do leave me a note in the comments. I'm always willing to learn. That's lifelong learning is one of my mantras in order to keep my brain active. It's very important, especially as you get older, to keep your brain engaged. So constant learning is a way that I try and do that. Okie dokie, almost at the end now. And come to the end. And all I do now is just pull it in like that. And you can see all the fabric folds in rather nicely and neatly. And I just hold it together with a little knot. Helps if I make the knot, doesn't it? Wait a minute, put it a bit tighter. There we go. Put it so that we've got even Stevens going all the way around. And then grab that, make sure it's pulled in, knot it a couple of times or wrap it around a couple of times, give it a knot, and then you can just even it out a little bit where you need it. But to be honest, it doesn't need to be perfect, because this bit, give it another knot just to be sure, this bit is covered up. Now you can leave yours uncovered if you'd like. What I sometimes do as well is I put a bit of batting in there if I need it to be kind of properly pushed forward. But one way I've found that works really well is the stiff felt, this kind of stuff. Let me grab some out. This kind of stuff with some stiffness to it. It's a craft felt, but it's perfect for backing your pieces. So what I do is I cut a circle out of this and then I just over sew it onto the back of the fabric there, and that makes a nice finish. Let me show you one that I've done previously. So let's have a look at our collection. So there's the little pumpkin that we made, and that's the oversewed back on there. If you want to go and have a look at one of the videos I've done previously, I'll show you the oversewing perhaps on those as well. This one was the little owl. I've got two of those because I'm going to give one away. But again, backing is done exactly the same, and they were done exactly the same way as this toady guy. So how I find the measurement for the back, you could just trace around this. It's going to be then too big. So what I do is I trace around the inner ring, and that gives me kind of a ballpark to go out. And then if I need to trim it down a little bit, I can do. So it just fits perfectly onto the back of your stitching. So there we have him. And all he needs now is a little bit of finishing. Sometimes I do this before I actually frame them up. I've got some of this Dorland's wax, and very carefully, so as not to get it on the fabric, some retro doing this. I should do it before it goes on the frame, but I just put some of this to finish off the paint because it gives it a nice kind of a sheen, and I just very gently rub it on. Then I'll let this dry and I'll just polish it up with a soft cloth. You can do this with any, if you've got any of the chalk paints that you use the wax covering for, that works as well. So big tins of that you can get really cheaply. Dorland's, I admit, is quite a bit expensive, depending on where you are in the world. But anything that gives that kind of a nice coating, a waxy coating, just to finish it up. So all the way around, just a little bit on my finger just to rub in, trying to be very careful not to get it onto the embroidery now. As I say, I do this generally before I hoop it up for the last time. In this case, I could not locate it, but now I have located it, all is well. So I'm going to leave that to dry, and then that just gets buffed up after about half an hour or so. I leave it for a little while. And the only other thing I do then is to add in some ribbon onto the top. So again, grabbing one of my pieces out, just a little bit of ribbon on that top bit, and then it's ready to hang. So you can just hang that straight up onto a hook. You can also take it completely out of its frame if you want to put it in an actual square frame. Also a possibility if that's what you'd like to do. So you just do frame however you would like to frame. But those two look quite nice together as little little creatures. I'm really enjoying making these. Such fun. And I will keep mine up year round. You know, you could keep yours just as a Halloween decoration or whatever, but I just quite like these guys and they can stay. They can stay. Anyway, there he is. I hope you've enjoyed having a look. I've got the rest of my coffee to finish off here, so I'm going to do that, but I'll be back here very soon with something else. So don't forget to like and subscribe and stay tuned. You'll get to know when I next upload a video. Bye for now.